All right. Well, this may be about it. So today we have Reverend Scott Robinson, who we've had a year ago to discuss with us the life of Saint Francis and his encounter with the Sultan, which was very well received, Scott.
Good.
And well, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and we'll get moving with your presentation.
Hey, good morning. I'm a parishioner at St. Martin's, the other end of Chestnut Hill, and a member of the Third Order of St. Francis, which is an Episcopal religious order with a rule and vows, but we live in the world rather than in community. And it was in that capacity that I got to see you all last year, but with my presentation on St. Francis and Islam. And this morning is something very different. It's much more personal to me, less academic. But there's a strange little twist I need to prepare you for. When we originally planned for me to be giving this talk back in March, I had hired a videographer to come record it so I would have a demo recording of the talk. And then of course it didn't happen. But I saw no point in waiting for the pandemic to pass before making the demo because who knew when that would happen? So what I'm going to do is I want to show you my talk today pre-recorded. It's about 13 minutes, and then I'll come back live and we'll have discussion time on what you've heard. I have to prepare you for one other thing. At the very beginning of my talk, I say 2009. In fact, I meant to say 2019. We're going to fix that, but we didn't have time to do it before this morning. So I guess since we're starting at 10 for the 9:45, I should get going with that. And I'll be back in about 13 minutes. Fatal neurodegenerative disease. Sorry, the beginning. There we go. I give you the treasures of darkness and the riches hidden in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who calls you by name. Isaiah 45, verse.
I think the sound went out on the video.
I don't remember much of what the physician who gave me my diagnosis said, because when my wife, my apologies, I'll start it again. I muted my own microphone, but I guess that muted the video too. So I'll start again without myself muted.
Yes, you have to keep your microphone on.
Okay, thanks. I will give you the treasures of darkness and the riches hidden in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who calls you by name. Isaiah 45, verse 3. In the spring of 2009, I was diagnosed with a fatal neurodegenerative disease called corticobasal syndrome. It's a nastier cousin of Parkinson's disease, one that moves faster and for which there is no treatment. On the morning I checked myself into the emergency department at Penn Hospital, I could barely walk, even with my wife's help. It was a relief to finally sink into a wheelchair once I got inside. The next time I walked down that hallway, it took 3 physical therapists to hold me upright. I don't remember much of what the physician who gave me my diagnosis said, because when my wife, who's also a doctor, began to quietly weep, I sort of went out of body. After he'd gone, I said, "So this is something people die of?" She nodded as she held me, and we cried together. My wife and I had a lot of conversations I didn't want to have about life support and feeding tubes and how long before the medication stopped working. We figured I probably had 3 to 5 years. I began to make preparations. I started letters to be given to my 2 daughters and my goddaughter when they turned 21. I started a list of happy memories to be read to me as my cognitive loss got worse. My wife and I wrote my advanced directive, listing the things I didn't want: feeding tube, CPR. I made a list of objects I wanted with me in the room where I died. My wife and children put in new railings in my house, handlebars in the bathroom. Our pastor said the church could build a wheelchair ramp for our house. I gave away artwork. I gave away file boxes full of books. I prayed a lot. I read books about death and dying, which I've been doing for years anyway, because I'm a hospice chaplain. Now, one of the reasons I love being a hospice chaplain is that no one ever asks me to pray for a miraculous cure. My patients know they are dying, and most of them are ready. So my job is just to land the plane well. I think the experience of ministering to the dying is one of the main reasons I was able to remain as calm and focused as I was in the weeks after my diagnosis. In fact, I was kind of glad I didn't have something like cancer that I would be expected to fight. You hear so many stories about brave people overcoming the odds and fighting their way back to health. Maybe you know some of those people. Maybe you are some of those people. And I knew that wasn't me. I knew I didn't have it in me to fight, that I would rather prepare to die well than fight to stay alive. In fact, the end stage of corticobasal degeneration is so horrifying. I was comforted to learn that by the time I got there, physician-assisted suicide would be legal in New Jersey. At the same time, an interesting thing began to happen. Learning how to take care of myself and preserve what functioning I had while I could, I found myself spending more time in the right here and right now than I ever had before. I watched myself move in slow motion. Bradykinesia is the medical term. I committed to memory the names of every nurse, aide, therapist, physician, and specialist with whom I came into contact. I noticed how my body felt, how it acted, how it worked, and how it didn't work. I also began wrestling with a passage from 1 Peter, in which the writer addresses the nascent Jesus movement as people who may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Now, that sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But I realized I had no idea what it means or feels like to be called out of darkness and into the light. But I think I do now, at least with respect to myself. I have come to believe that the darkness is most of what goes on in my head, playing and replaying resentful memories, useless recriminations, alternative histories, what ifs and if onlys, revenge scenarios, sexual fantasies, endless loops upon loops that keep me in my head and out of touch with whatever is happening outside my head. Conversely, I have come to believe that the wonderful light is what exists on the other side of my eyeballs, the people, places, activities, and situations in which I am actually placed. Since my diagnosis, I've spent considerably less time in the darkness inside my head and a lot more time in the wonderful light. I am more in touch with my own life as I am living it. It makes me wonder how much life I missed while hanging out in the darkness inside my head. There must have been a lot more life I could have lived in front of my eyeballs than I have lived behind them. Another advantage of the wonderful light is the way it has encouraged me to cultivate the curiosity about things that the Buddhist writers are always recommending. What's it like to have someone stand with you in the bathroom because you're a fall risk? What's it like to eat French toast with your fingers in front of other people because only one of your hands works? What's it like to realize you are never going to be a grandfather or a father of the bride or see your goddaughter confirmed? What's it like to lose the ability to type, to play musical instruments? What's it like when people honk at you because you're not hobbling fast enough? What's it like to have someone else wash your backside in a shower chair? Of course, all these things would have been happening to me whether I were living in the darkness in my head or in the wonderful light. But in the light, there were things I was learning about and learning from, rather than merely things that were happening to me. This is a choice we all make, moment by moment, to stay present or to check out, to stand the ground of our awareness or retreat into self-distraction. We can be victims of events or we can be students of them. Now, the temptation to retreat sometimes to some inner happy place can be very strong, and not just for me, but I've heard so many people, friends, patients, families, express gratitude for the immediacy, the intensity of presence they've experienced in the shadow of death. Few things can help us to be here now, like knowing we won't be here much longer. So I'm grateful for the way my illness has evicted me from my inner darkness and thrust me into the outer light, where my life has a reality and immediacy it has only rarely had in the past. This is not to say, of course, that I never sneak back into my inner darkness from time to time. Of course I do. But I don't live there any longer. I do think a lot about dying and pain and debility, but those thoughts are about real things. The family I worry about and dread to leave are real. The friends who come to visit me are real. The medication-induced constipation is real. It's all real. Maybe this is why Jesus said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Not more easily, not more conveniently, certainly not more painlessly. Just more abundantly, more life, uncensored life, the whole dirty ball of wax. When I first came home from the hospital after being diagnosed, my wife gave me a tour of the modifications she had made to the house in anticipation of my return. As I sat in the new shower chair, holding onto the newly installed grab bar, she pointed out how the shower doors had been replaced with a curtain. Now this curtain, she said, is the part that's really going to drive you crazy. I stared at her for a moment, then I began to laugh. Oh, I see, I exclaimed. So this is the part that is going to drive me crazy. I was wondering what the really annoying part was going to be. At last, the other shoe has dropped. We collapsed in laughter, giggling helplessly for a long time. When my time comes, I hope I am ready. At peace with God and my fellow creatures, I pray I can go calmly and steadily into the great mystery. But one thing became clear in that damp shower stall. I am not yet ready to go, and my wife is not yet ready to lose me. About 2 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I pushed my walker up the handicapped ramp at my bank and discovered that the ramp ends in a flight of stairs. So I folded up the walker like a beach chair and tucked it under my arm and grabbed hold of the railing and climbed the stairs. I heard a man's voice call out from the sidewalk, "They took your walk, but they didn't take your step. You look like you're going to throw that thing in the Olympics." I did keep exercising. I did my physical therapy. I resumed practicing the accordion and even started tentatively doing some yoga. As a sort of a Hail Mary, the doctors had given me a drug used to treat Parkinson's. And to everyone's surprise, it helped. Against all expectations, I started getting better. Soon the wheelchair was stored away in the basement, then the walker. I resumed walking a mile to church and a mile back for morning prayer on weekdays. I resumed mowing the lawn, doing the grocery shopping, walking the dog. I got my driver's license back. In October, my neurologist finally changed my diagnosis to Parkinson's disease. And now, of course, the gift that keeps on taking, as Michael J. Fox calls it, is not ordinarily something to turn cartwheels about. But in my case, it was definitely good news. You wouldn't have known it, though, from the way I responded to my unfortunate doctor's first intimation that I may not be dying anytime soon. "Don't mess with me," I told the poor man. See, I had worked very hard to reconfigure my life to that of a dying person. And while the prospect of a near normal lifespan was exhilarating, it was also disorienting. I had quit my job. I had broken the grim news to family and friends. I had spent many hours over several months steadying myself, reading, meditating, and praying, preparing not to be here anymore. It was a big adjustment. I actually found myself occasionally missing those first awful days when I knew, more or less, exactly what was going to happen. If you live in the dark a long time and the sun comes out, wrote memoirist Mary Carr, you do not cross into it whistling. But I know I have more to be grateful for than I have time to list. To name just one thing, though, I'm grateful for what the experience has taught me about myself, that I am strong, that I can apply myself, that I am a fighter. In fact, I'm now taking a boxing-based exercise class for people with Parkinson's. I'm grateful that though they took my walk, they didn't take my step. These, then, are the treasures of darkness, the riches hidden in secret places that I brought with me when God called me out into the wonderful light. The knowledge that, as C.S. Lewis put it, it is only in the present moment in which freedom and actuality are offered to human beings. The knowledge that wherever we are and whenever it is, this is the house of God. Here is the gate of heaven. Now is the acceptable time. And today is the day of salvation. Okay, well, welcome back. If I were still in my teaching days at Eastern University, this would be the point at which I would say, questions, answers, smart remarks. I would like to follow up with, I was having a conversation with my wife just yesterday. We were talking about the time that I was at first Penn Hospital and then at Moss Rehab. And my recollection of that time is of getting along very well with the staff and being pretty agreeable. Her recollection is that I apparently was considerably grumpier than I remember. And I really, really don't remember it that way. And she said, this is what's going to happen as the cognitive part of Parkinson's progresses, is that your experience of reality is going to be very much at odds with everybody else's, and you're not going to understand why. So this is something I'm really trying to prepare for. I remember I had worked very hard in physical therapy, and they had certified me, they gave me a piece of paper certifying me, saying that I was okay to go to the bathroom by myself. Mm. And so one night I was going to the bathroom and this nurse insisted on standing in the bathroom with me. And I said, PT says I can do this by myself. And he insisted on standing in there with me anyway. And I told my wife, I wish if I had to do it over again, I would have pulled the help cord to get another nurse in there and rat this guy out. Say, look, I have a right to do this, get him out of here. Mm-hmm. And my wife says that would not have been the right thing to do because it's a broken system. There's only so much resources. And if they have the choice between sending their nurses and aides to a class on how to deal with patients' dignity and rights and a class on how to deal with blood clots in the legs, they're going to send them to the blood clots class because that's people die of those things. And even if the system is not working optimally, for instance, my contention is PT should have told me, you have the right to do this, but it may not be recognized or observed in real life. And then I wouldn't have been so indignant. But my wife says, if as a patient, you insist on your rights, what that will do is that will make the staff clamp down more on you, which will make you more angry, which will make them clamp down more on you until you end up in a psych ward. And this is really a big challenge for me. So that's the update on what you just saw is the where are they now story. So I guess my question is, where are you now? What's on your mind?
I'm very anxiety ridden right now. My daughter's missing, so that's a challenge that I am having to deal with right now. Excuse me. Seems like every time I talk about her, I get emotional.
Well, of course.
I was able to get out and do some things yesterday to take my mind off of it. There are a few friends that have reached out to me, and they've hired a private investigator, and I have filed a missing persons report. So this is where I am right now.
Yeah.
I'm sort of in a darkness right now.
How scary. How old is your daughter?
She's an adult. She's 33. She's paranoid schizophrenic, and she doesn't believe that she is, and
Right.
she doesn't want to take the medicine. And I had to 302 her because she almost killed me. She got to that point, and when they released her, they put her in a shelter, but she said that someone was trying to harm her there and had threatened her. And then she left the next morning, and I haven't seen her since.
Oh, how very scary.
So I don't know if that person got to her, or if she just was able to find long-term housing, or if she left Philadelphia and is wandering around somewhere. I don't know where she is. I'm very concerned.
For those who aren't aware, the term to 302 someone means to involuntarily commit them. What is your daughter's name?
Threya.
Threya.
Thuraiya.
Thura.
Aiya.
Threya. Okay. And what's your name?
Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi.
I'll definitely remember both of you in prayer.
I need all the prayers I can get.
That's very scary. But yes, it is so hard once the medical establishments need to do what they see as keeping someone safe collides with the patient's view of the world. I mean, and I can understand the immense frustration of her not believing that she's sick, and you knowing for a fact that she is.
More of the frustration comes from the mental health system itself, because they don't give you help. They tell you, I can neither confirm nor deny that she's here. We can't tell you anything. And I realize there's HIPAA law involved, for the sake of the patient, my daughter, because she's an adult. And so I don't know anything. They won't tell me anything. So it's very, very hard.
Now that surprises me, perhaps because I work in hospice. Maybe the HIPAA laws are different in hospice than they are the mental health area. But my understanding is that you can always tell immediate family.
Not if you're an adult. She's an adult. That's the problem. If she were a child, then I would have the right. But because she's an adult, they won't tell me anything.
Oh gosh, that is frustrating. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I hope she turns up soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll all be praying for you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Well, Scott, you're very brave to share this experience with us. And the moment, living in the present moment is, I think, a call that we're all invited to, certainly by Jesus. And it's so difficult.
It is.
And you spoke about living inside your head in that area of darkness. It's very revealing. It's a revealing about you and how you conduct yourself in these kind of situations and how you embody this experience. I'm not so sure I would be able to do this.
Well, as I said, hospice work, I think, really helped prepare me. For instance, although I loved seeing patients, I hated bereavement calls because they were so unpredictable. Sometimes they were lovely. I could go in and talk with them, and it was helpful and worthwhile. Obviously worthwhile. Other times you go in and death has brought out all the crazy in everybody. So going out on bereavement calls really helped me to sort of prepare the ground for me to be able to walk into a room, take a moment before I walk into a room and empty my head. Just of all agenda, all preconceived notions, all just walk in like a little balloon with my head like a balloon and have all my feelers out and put everything in me into reading the room before I said a thing. And I think that experience helped prepare me, because I think if I hadn't had that, I would have had a very, very different experience post-diagnosis. So I'm grateful for that.
Could you speak maybe a little bit about how this has prepared you for the 2020 pandemic experience that a lot of people must be going through in a very different way what you went through?
Right. Oh, that's so hard. It's so different in so many ways. For instance, being on a ventilator terrifies me. The thought of being on a ventilator, but that isn't something that I would have had to, would have applied to me if I had corticobasal degeneration.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about a lot of people are living in that dark place when they aren't really sick. Panic stricken.
Right. Yeah. I was talking with Jonathan about this before we all convened. It's so hard to understand very often people's responses to things. For instance, I just read about a man in Wichita, Kansas, who was plotting to murder the mayor of Wichita because he thought the mayor's mask mandate was tyranny. And I simply cannot fathom being that angry about masks being tyranny during a pandemic. So the way people have responded to this is all over the map. I mean, here in Philly, people are pretty good about masking. And here at Chestnut Hill, people are pretty good about masking. And I think there must be as many different ways of responding to this threat of disease as there are demographics. I mean, I know some people consider precautions for the disease as being cowardly or as lacking faith, or and other people see it as being responsible and using common sense. So I guess that's my long way of saying I don't really have an answer for that. I'm having a very difficult time connecting the dots between those two things.
Yeah.
But I know that if someone I knew were sick, it would be very scary. Everyone I know who has gotten the disease has recovered from it. So that's been very, very reassuring. But I don't know, not everybody does, obviously.
It just seems such a pity so many people are living in kind of unnecessarily are kind of willing themselves, imagining themselves into that dark place that their present has not really necessitated.
Right. And, it's funny, just this morning, my wife and I were talking about this, about how we feel actually guiltily fortunate in some ways about the pandemic and how it has brought our family so much closer together by drawing our attention away from the outside and into ourselves and each other. We've gotten a dog and we've spent a lot of time together, and it's funny to talk about because you don't really want to say like, oh, the Irish potato famine was so good for our family. I mean, that's just, doesn't a good look. But at the same time, we do feel very, very fortunate in some ways that my wife's been able to work from home and my kids have been able to go to school from home 3 days of the week and go to school in very controlled circumstances in person 2 days a week. And we spend a lot of time together beyond that. So that's been very wonderful. And we're trying to figure out a way to talk about that without sounding obnoxious.
I would concur with you, Scott. It has been in some ways a blessing, a silver lining to all this, because we've adapted and some of us have changed our lifestyles and have gotten rid of the excess, the unnecessary components of our daily life. And it has shifted, a major shift, and it could be a paradigm shift in the bigger picture.
It could be. Let's hope.
Let's hope. We can only hope.
Yeah.
I wanted to explore a little bit about this darkness, and would you say in some ways that this is kind of was it a dark night of the soul too? I mean, a place that God was reaching out to you, and maybe you didn't know it at that moment, as we often think of John of the Cross and his spirituality.
I recently realized that one of the things I'm going to have to give up is all my revenge fantasies, because I realized even if I had, as Prospero said in The Tempest, now at last lies in my power all my enemies, I wouldn't have the energy or the time to do anything about it. But I'm a person who never lets anything go. I have this backpack of outrage that I carry around with me. Every time, like my wife thinks I have some minor PTSD from the experience of that nurse not letting me use the bathroom by myself. And I would love to have the serenity of spirit to just let it go, but that's really, really hard for me. And that's the kind of thing that took up most of my brain before my diagnosis, not just revenge scenarios, but dwelling on the past and worrying about the future. Those are the two things. That's what I'm calling the darkness, is dwelling on the past and worrying about the future. And the light is looking at the present, which wise people have been saying for thousands of years, of course, but until some of us need to have things brought home in a very immediate and upside the head kind of way. That's me. It's as though the wisdom of the ages doesn't apply until you trip over it.
Right. And God threw a brick at you, so to speak.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, I think, well, I'm going to stop talking for a moment, but anybody else have some thoughts? Pam, you're muted. If you want to unmute yourself.
Okay.
And likewise, Wendy as well. Hillary. Comments from the crowd?
I hope I don't crash. My computer has a tendency to do that, so I may have to get back on quickly. But to Reverend Robinson, maybe what happened to me might help you. When I was a youngster, I had this thing, if you mentioned my father's name, I was angry for 2 weeks. But I had a very lovely aunt, his sister, who said to me one weekend when I went to visit, she said, you know, the mind is like a closet. She says, if you throw things into the closet any old way, each time you open the door, they will fall out into your face. She says, but if you put the things nice and neat into the closet, they will not. From that day until my father died. I could be here in Philadelphia, he could be in New York. I would get ready to call him or the phone would ring and vice versa. So maybe think of the closet and taking those things off of your shoulder and see if somehow that can make a difference.
That's brilliant. I love that metaphor. That's great. Put things in there neatly. Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I've also noticed that I'm at an age, I'm 56, so I'm at an age where a lot of my friends are dealing with parents with dementia. And I know that's it's a very similar thing. I've dealt with people with dementia, but only in a hospice chaplain capacity, so not yet as a family member. And it looks like I may be spared that, which is a comfort. But I know a lot of people are my age, a lot of my peers are dealing with that, and it's just immensely sad and frustrating because again, people don't know or don't believe that they're sick. Jonathan, you said that by talking about this was brave. Years ago, when I first began writing about an experience of depression, I was blogging about it, and people's comments on the blog were, "This is very courageous," and my thought was, "What? What do you mean courageous? What am I?" Because I didn't think of it as courageous. It's a little bit alarming to be told you're doing something courageous when you hadn't thought about it that way.
Mm.
But well, one thing I said in an early blog was, for years, I didn't realize I was depressed. I just thought everything sucked. And I know that that's the way with any kind of cognitive loss, Parkinson's or dementia or whatever it is. People don't know that they're sick, and how to communicate with them is just one of the never-ending great mysteries that nothing can prepare you for until you have to do it, I guess. Is anybody else in a situation where they have a family member with Parkinson's or dementia or something where it makes it difficult to relate to them in that way? Besides Wendy, I know that's very difficult with a schizophrenia. It's just so intractable, I know.
Well, at St. Paul's, we had a deacon, Rob Davidson, who had Parkinson's, and we saw the challenges and difficulties that were surmounting as he progressed. He's now retired from that position, and we pray that he's doing well. But it was kind of it was a teaching moment for all of us too. For those of us who knew Rob during his tenure, which he left, I guess, about a year and a half ago.
Well, I know that it's not a predictable and steady degeneration of different systems. There's control of the muscles, there's balance, there's cognitive, there's all kinds of stuff. And they don't necessarily all happen or all happen at the same rate. So that must make it very hard for him to, that's one thing I'm up against, is planning for the future.
Yeah.
No idea what's going to happen or when it's going to happen or at what rate it's going to happen. So that must have made his last few years really tough, trying to when to get out gracefully and how long to keep at it.
Well, I don't think he knew when to leave gracefully. He persisted, but I think at some point he was counseled to leave, and to call it quits.
Do you remember, Jonathan, when he, for several years there, he participated in adult education programs, and it always seemed to us that what he would chime in with was quirky.
He had a quirky sense of humor for sure, but it was Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It seemed to
now
be, there seemed to be a disconnect sometimes. And that may be part of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, what's coming to mind here, everyone, and Scott, is the story of Lazarus, the raising of Lazarus. And I say that because you were given a chance here, beginning a new life in a sense, being called back. But we're all going to die someday. There's no getting out of this.
Right.
How do we, I mean, what lessons can we learn from this, from you, for all of us, that we're going to face our demise in whatever that form it's going to take?
Right.
And Lazarus dies too, of course, again.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that what terrified me so much about cortical basal degeneration is that at the end, you lose all control of the muscles of your body, and your cognitive loss is so great you don't understand why. So there's a lot of what's called patient distress, which involves a lot of weeping and panic and terror and I knew I didn't want to die that way, both for myself and for the sake of my kids. I don't want my children to see me die that way. I had worked enough with enough patients as a chaplain who had seen their own parents die in horrible ways. And I didn't want that picture in their heads of my last days. Usually I was able to say, that's not going to happen to you. Like I had one patient who had cancer, and she said her father had stomach cancer. And at the end, he was so crazy with pain, they had to restrain him. And she was just terrified. And I was glad to be able to tell her, that's not going to happen to you. Palliative care is much better now than it was when your dad was sick. But so for me, one of the blessings of discovering that I had Parkinson's was that I may be loopy and out of it by the end, or I may not. There's no way of knowing for sure. But I'm not going to be terrified and unable to control myself. I want to be there for it. That's what I want. I want to be there for it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I know everybody says they want to go quickly, but I'm not sure about that. I think going slowly, and I've seen this in hospice, it allows you to make peace with everybody, to say, I love you, I forgive you, I'm sorry and goodbye to everybody, to set your affairs in order, to prepare yourself inwardly. I think there's something to be said for not necessarily just dropping dead quickly and relatively unmessily.
Yeah, they sometimes compare that to one dying of cancer versus one dying of an aneurysm or heart attack.
Right.
You have some time on your hands to make closure, to tidy up things, if you will, and it's a good thing for loved ones and family members.
Yes, I think so.
David Bowie did a very good thing in the last year of his life when he, if you're familiar with his David Bowie, recorded an album in his dying days. I thought that was quite remarkable.
I have not
turned it into a creative experience, if you will, and acceptance is a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've found that also. I've had sort of bursts of creativity since getting this, as you put it, sort of new lease on life. I just want to make sure I've said everything I have to say before I go and heard everything I have to hear. So I didn't realize he did that. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, do check it out.
Interesting.
You could totally do that, Scott. When I first met your wife, that's what I think you did. Weren't you a song writer, musician?
Matter of fact, I am recording. Well, I'm not recording a CD. I'm recording an album. In the last few weeks, I have moved hundreds of unsold CDs out of my basement to the curb. I call it a "get the CDs out of my basement before my wife divorces me" sale. I gave a lot of them away. We still sell a trickle of music online, enough to keep the website up anyway, from Spotify and Pandora and iTunes, that sort of thing. CDs that try to sell buggy whips. It's just, but so when I say making a CD, I should say making an album that'll be available for download or what have you.
That's much better term.
Because I had these chants in me, and I didn't want them to die with me. I wanted them to be out there. And I know I have one song in particular that I wrote that my friends tell me they sing when they're worried, which just means so much to me. Just to know that what you've made makes a difference. And so that's the reason I'm making this last CD, is to make sure that these things that have helped me are available to help other people if that's what God wants them to do.
Well, what you recorded was beautiful, and I'm so happy that you're doing better because I followed it secondhand through Allison. So I was always asking her updates. So I'm just so happy for you guys that you're doing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I live half a block away from Scott, and when the humidity and the temperature's right outside, I can hear is it harmonium, accordion?
Harmonium sometimes, concertina sometimes, all different.
Very beautiful sounds that permeate the atmosphere as I'm working in my backyard garden. Thank you, Scott. It's always, I know that you're alive and well when I hear that music.
I didn't realize it wafted that far.
Every so often, and thank you.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful counter to the Lorenzen noises that come by from your neighbor and ours.
Oh, from the quarry, yes.
Yes, quarry.
Well, thank you, everybody. I see it's 10:50.
If there's anything else, anybody else to say, maybe chime in before.
I thought if everyone has said all they want to say, I might close with a little Pennsylvania Dutch healing prayer.
Beautiful.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Adonai Elohim, may it please thee, Lord, to hear my prayer and to heal my affliction. My faith is entirely in thy goodness. I am healing already, for thy holiness is manifested within me, and thy spirit is manifested within my own. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody,
you.
for joining.
Yeah, I'll be praying for you and for Thuria.
Thank you so much. I
Likewise.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
See you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.